Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
I hadn't spoken to my father in years, but when his lawyer's letter arrived asking me to come in for the reading of his will, I decided to go. It wasn't like I had much of a choice. I pulled the letter out of the envelope, staring at it for a moment. I'd always felt like a disappointment to my father. He was a real estate mogul, successful in a way that made people envy him. And Lucas, my older brother, had always been his golden child. Lucas had the charm, the ambition, the look that could close any deal. He followed our father's path without question. While I ran in the opposite direction, I became a firefighter. Dad never respected that. He called it a waste of potential once, in front of Lucas. I could still hear his voice. So going to the will reading felt like walking into a lion's den. But there was something in me, some stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd seen something in me that he never had the words to say. When I got to the lawyer's office, Lucas was already there. I could see it the moment I stepped in. The smug, effortless confidence. He stood, suit pressed, looking every bit the part of a man who had already claimed the crown. "Ellie," he said, his voice flat, like he was annoyed that I'd shown up. He nodded toward the empty chair across from him. I didn't respond, just sat down, smoothing the hem of my fire service uniform. Lucas probably thought I was still that awkward kid trying to prove herself. But now, I wasn't trying to prove anything to him. I had to remind myself of that. Just focus on what was about to happen. The lawyer, Mr. Green, cleared his throat and opened the will. I could feel the tension in the room, thickening like smoke. "We'll begin with the estate details," he said, his voice steady. But I wasn't listening to him. My focus was on Lucas, who shifted in his seat, clearly waiting for the moment when the bulk of Dad's money and properties would be his. He'd earned it in Dad's eyes. He'd been loyal to the empire, just like Dad wanted. Green kept talking, but all I could hear was the weight of the moment. It was Lucas's turn next. Lucas West will inherit all of the following: the bulk of the liquid assets, the family's primary residence, and rights to most of the commercial properties. Of course, nothing unexpected. I almost felt bad for him. He'd been expecting it. But then Mr. Green paused, flipping another page. "Ellie West will inherit the family business, the company's full operations, all properties and investments, effective immediately." There was silence. Then Lucas blinked, his jaw tightening. He stared at Green as if the words had been a mistake or some cruel joke. But they weren't. The letter in my hand was real. This was real. "Excuse me," Lucas finally said, his voice cold. "What do you mean by the company? The entire company?" Mr. Green nodded. "Yes. Your father's will explicitly states that Ellie is to take over the leadership of West Enterprises." I held my breath. Lucas shifted, visibly trying to mask his shock. "That's absurd," he muttered, clearly struggling. "Ellie doesn't know the first thing about running a business." I clenched my fists under the table, but I didn't react. Instead, I focused on the words, like they were a lifeline in a storm. "Your father made it clear. The will is legally binding," Green said, voice firm. "It's all in the documents." Lucas's face reddened, and he leaned forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Ellie, come on. This is a huge responsibility. I've been running things for years. Let me take over. I can—" "No," I cut him off, finally finding my voice. "I'm not stepping down, Lucas. This is mine." He stared at me like I'd slapped him, but I wasn't backing down. He shot a quick glance at Green, trying to read him, but Green didn't waver. I felt a strange rush of something I hadn't expected. I wasn't the disappointment. Not anymore. My father had chosen me for this. Maybe I wasn't the child he wanted, but I was the one he trusted to keep this empire alive. Lucas stood up, fists clenched, but instead of confronting me, he turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I stayed seated. The tension hadn't left the room. I could still feel it swirling in the air, but I didn't need to prove anything anymore. "Ellie," Green said gently, pulling me from my thoughts. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I'll help you navigate the transition. I'll make sure you have everything you need." I nodded, trying to focus on the practical, on what came next. I didn't know the first thing about real estate, but this was mine now, all of it. As I looked over the piles of paperwork in front of me, I realized something. Lucas might have been Dad's favorite, but I wasn't going to let him win this time. "Mr. Green's voice cut through the silence, steady but carrying a weight that seemed to press down on all of us. As for the disposition of the family business, West Enterprises will be inherited by Ellie West, effective immediately. All assets, land, buildings, and investments will transfer to her leadership. I froze. I couldn't breathe for a second. My eyes darted to Lucas, whose smug expression immediately faltered. His eyes widened for a brief moment, just long enough for me to catch it. Then his face turned into a mask, one he was all too good at wearing. But I saw the shock beneath it. He wasn't expecting this. Not at all. Wait, what? Lucas's voice was low, tinged with disbelief, but it carried like an accusation. You're saying Ellie is in charge of the company now? Mr. Green nodded. That's correct. The will explicitly names Ellie as the new head of the company. I could feel the weight of Lucas's gaze piercing into me. I wanted to look away, but I forced myself to hold his stare. He wasn't used to not getting what he wanted. He probably expected the estate, the power, the whole damn thing handed to him like it always had been. But she doesn't know anything about running this business, he pressed, his voice tight with frustration. She's a firefighter, for God's sake. He turned to Mr. Green, like he was trying to shake some sense into the room. Are you sure this is what my father wanted? Mr. Green was calm, unflinching. It's clear from the documents. Your father had faith in Ellie's ability to lead. His instructions were very specific. The words hit like a punch in the gut. My father, who never gave me the time of day, had trusted me with all of it, not Lucas. Me. Lucas shifted in his seat, visibly struggling to adjust to the reality of it. He was fighting the urge to lash out, but there was nothing he could do now. His whole life, he'd been the one to carry the torch, to walk in our father's shadow. But now it was mine. I can help, Lucas said after a beat, trying to recover. Ellie, you've always been good at putting out fires, right? I'm sure I could walk you through the basics, show you the ropes. I didn't react right away. His words stung, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing how much they'd hit. He was trying to play the role of the helpful big brother, but I knew better. He was trying to make this whole thing feel like a mistake, like I didn't deserve it, like Dad had gone soft in his final days, but I knew what my father had meant. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm not interested in your help, Lucas. This is mine now. I let the words sit in the air for a moment, watching his face twist, trying to process the shift. His eyes flickered between disbelief and something darker, resentment, maybe. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. You don't know anything about this world, Ellie. You've never even wanted to be part of it? His words stung, but they only made me more certain. He was right. I'd never wanted this. I'd never wanted any of it. Not the legacy, not the power. But now it was mine, whether I liked it or not. I don't need to know everything right now, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I know how to learn, Lucas, and I'm damn good at making decisions under pressure. Something you might want to keep in mind? His face tightened, and I could see the edges of his carefully crafted facade crumbling. The smug confidence he'd walked in with was gone, replaced by a mixture of anger and humiliation. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then the reality of it all hit me. This was my father's final decision. And whether I liked it or not, I had to own it. I took a slow breath, looking at Mr. Green. I'll need a copy of everything, I said, steady, but still feeling the weight of the moment. The financials, the properties, everything. Of course, Green said, nodding. We'll get that prepared for you. Lucas didn't say anything else. He just stood up abruptly and walked out of the room, the door slamming behind him. The tension didn't leave with him, though. It lingered, thick in the air. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest. The reality of what had just happened was still sinking in. My father had chosen me, not Lucas. I couldn't tell if that meant something good or something terrible, but I wasn't going to shy away from it. Ellie, Green said softly, breaking me out of my thoughts. You're going to need some time to go over everything, but you're not alone in this. I'll help guide you through it. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. But I had to do this. For me, for my father, for everything I'd ever been too afraid to show him. I stood up, adjusting my uniform as I made my way to the door, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a new kind of armor. For the first time, I wasn't a disappointment. I was the one in charge. And that, for better or worse, was something I was going to have to figure out how to carry. Lucas stormed back into the room like a tornado, his fists clenched at his sides. His face was red, his jaw locked tight. I could feel the heat coming off him, the fury in the air. He paced for a second, then turned to face me, his voice sharp. You can't run this business, Ellie, he spat. You're not cut out for it. You've never even wanted this, and now you think you can just step in and take over? I didn't flinch. I'd heard all this before, just in different words. Lucas had always made it clear that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't fit in with the family's world. I've spent my whole life proving I don't need your approval, Lucas, I said, meeting his glare. I don't need your opinion now, either. Of course you don't, he sneered. But you're wrong if you think this will work out the way you imagine. This company, this empire, it's not some damn playground for you to dabble in. It's real. People's livelihoods are tied to it. You think playing dress up in a suit is enough to make you a leader? His words stung, but I didn't let him see it. I'd been called worse. I had to remind myself that he was just angry, trying to tear me down because this wasn't what he expected. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice steady. I don't have your experience and I don't need to be like you. What I do have is the estate, legally. That's what matters. I could see the words sink in, the shock still there beneath his anger. He didn't know how to respond. His eyes flashed with something darker now. You think Dad made the right choice? He was sentimental in the end, you know. Weak. He couldn't see that you don't belong here. You don't have the chops for it. I stood up slowly, not backing down. Dad made his choice, not you, not me. I'm in charge now, Lucas. His lip curled like he couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. Fine, he said through clenched teeth, but don't come crawling to me when this falls apart. It will. You're not a West, you'll never be a West. I let that one hang in the air, the words like a challenge. I wasn't going to rise to his insults, not this time, not anymore. Lucas shoved his hands in his pockets and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed, and for a split second, I thought I might feel some sense of victory. But it wasn't a win. It was just a moment, one that felt a lot like survival. The silence in the room was heavy. I stayed standing, the words lingering, the tension still humming in my chest. The door to the hallway was still vibrating, like it couldn't decide if the argument was over. Mr. Green cleared his throat softly, breaking the quiet. Ellie, I understand this is a lot to take in, he said, but we're here to make sure you have everything you need to move forward. I'm happy to walk you through the next steps. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. It wasn't just Lucas I had to fight. It was everything I didn't know, everything I wasn't prepared for. This was bigger than me, bigger than any fight I'd ever had to face. Green handed me a thick stack of papers. The company's structure is relatively straightforward, but there's a lot to consider. The board of directors, key financials, ongoing projects, everything's tied into the real estate market. You'll need to make decisions, and quickly. He paused, watching me carefully. If you want, I can give you more details about the financial side. You'll need to know what's working and what's not. I could feel the weight of the papers in my hands, and I tried to steady my breath. I'll look through everything, I said, finally finding my voice. I'll handle it. Green nodded, but I could see the concern in his eyes. I believe you will. But remember, Ellie, this is no small task. It's not just about managing properties, it's managing people. The staff, the clients, the investors. You'll have to prove you can handle all of it. I swallowed hard. I knew. I'd known from the moment I stepped into that office that this was a test. Not just from Lucas, but from the world. From the expectations that came with being the new head of a massive real estate empire. When Green left me alone in the office, I stayed sitting for a long time, staring at the stacks of contracts, financials, and property evaluations in front of me. This was the mess Dad had left behind, and it was mine to clean up now. The problem was, I had no idea how to do it. I wasn't just walking into a new job. I was stepping into a world that had never made sense to me. But I had to try. I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when I was this close. So, I dug in. The papers didn't make any sense at first. Numbers, names, deals, properties. But I went through them anyway, slowly, painstakingly. Each page, each line felt like an obstacle. But I wasn't backing down. I had to do this. For me. For the memory of Dad. And in some way, to prove that Lucas was wrong. I wasn't going to fail. I wasn't going to be the screw-up anymore, even if I had to fake it till I made it. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of my childhood home. The place had always felt both familiar and foreign. Too many memories tied up in too much disappointment. But now, it felt different. Almost like a ghost house, hollowed out by the man who'd built it. A legacy I wasn't sure I wanted to carry. Inside, everything was still in its place, as if Dad might walk through the door any minute. The same paintings on the walls, the same expensive furniture. It was all so sterile. The smell of leather and mahogany lingered in the air, mixed with the dust of things that had been left behind. Rose, my mother, was sitting at the kitchen table, a pile of papers in front of her. She looked up as I entered, her face soft but distant. "Morning, Ellie," she said, her voice tired but warm. "Morning, Mom," I muttered, setting my bag down. "How's it going?" She shrugged, rubbing her temples. "You know, same as yesterday, just trying to get through it." I didn't know what to say. It had been years since I'd been close to my mother. After Dad's success and Lucas's rise to glory, she'd drifted further into her own world, where everything was about keeping up appearances. "We need to start going through his things," Rose said quietly. "Can you help?" I nodded and followed her into the study, the room I'd always avoided. It was too much of a reminder of everything I wasn't. The large mahogany desk where Dad sat and made his deals, the leather chair that creaked whenever he shifted, his bookshelves lined with business tomes, self-help guides, and books about power. But as I stood there, my gaze wandered to the corner, where a small, worn-out chair sat by the window. I used to sit there sometimes, when I was younger. I remember the few times Dad had let me in here. I'd watch him work, and he'd let me stay, just to be near him. I think deep down, he didn't want me to feel like I was completely out of place in his world. Those moments, small and few as they were the only times I could remember him offering any kind of validation. I shook the thought away and focused on the task. The sooner we finished, the sooner I could leave and pretend I wasn't the person standing at the edge of this family's empire. As I began picking through the papers, Rose cleared her throat, her voice quiet but pointed. "Ellie, are you sure about taking on the company? It's a lot. Your father wasn't easy on you, but he did leave you in charge. You should think about whether it's what you really want." I stopped, holding a stack of papers in my hands. She wasn't asking for an answer. She was asking for permission to worry, to tell me what I already knew, that this was too much, that I had no business trying to step into Dad's shoes, or any shoes for that matter. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't control. But it's mine now, Mom. I have to at least try." Rose didn't say anything for a long time. She simply looked at me, her face unreadable. I could see the weight of the years in her eyes, the tiredness of watching both of us fight for attention in a house where only one person truly mattered. "He never made it easy on you," she said finally, her voice almost regretful. "I know that." "Yeah?" I said, almost surprised by the sharpness in my voice. "He didn't, but it's different now." I paused, looking out the window. "He left me the business. Whether he meant to or not, it's mine, and I have to figure out how to use it." Rose nodded, but there was no joy in it, no pride, just a resigned acceptance. I spent the rest of the morning packing things into boxes, trying to shove the past into a neat little pile. But every box I packed felt heavier than the last. Dad's legacy loomed like a storm cloud over everything. I kept hearing his voice in my head, telling me I'd never amount to anything more than the girl who played with fire trucks. And yet, here I was, the one he'd chosen to inherit it all. It wasn't just a business, it was his life's work. It was everything he'd sacrificed for, everything he'd built. And now it was mine. I didn't know how I felt about that. Maybe I never would. But something inside me, something I hadn't known was there before, was starting to stir. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, I could make it work. Maybe I could prove him wrong. Not for him, but for me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't about fixing my relationship with Dad. It was about building something of my own. Something that was mine. I glanced at Rose, who was lost in her own thoughts, packing away another pile of Dad's things. I wasn't sure if she believed in me, but I was done waiting for anyone's approval. The business, for better or worse, was in my hands now, and I had to make it mine. The first few days felt like wading through a swamp, slow, exhausting, and filled with murky, unfamiliar terrain. I buried myself in paperwork, plowing through contracts, financial statements, and property evaluations. It was a mess. Some things made sense, leases, rent rolls, portfolio summaries, but most of it was just numbers and jargon, stuff that felt like another language. I spent hours in my office, sifting through stacks of documents, trying to get my head around the company's financial situation. There were some good investments, properties with solid returns, but a lot of them were on the brink of losing value. Some were in bad locations, others had been poorly maintained. I could feel the weight of it all. My father had let these things slip, and now it was my responsibility to fix them. The staff was wary. I could tell from the moment I stepped into the first meeting that they didn't trust me. Why should they? I was the outsider, the one who'd never been part of their world. For years, they'd worked under Lucas, and now they were supposed to follow me. A firefighter. At first, I kept my head down, tried to absorb everything, keep my distance. But the longer I sat in these rooms, the more I realized I couldn't afford to be passive. I had to show them I wasn't the same person they thought I was. That I could make tough decisions, even if they weren't what they wanted to hear. My first major move was firing 2 executives. Both had been caught embezzling, and I wasn't about to tolerate that. They thought I wouldn't notice, or maybe they thought I was too green to care. I wasn't. I'd been through too many high-stress situations in the firehouse to back down from a challenge. It didn't matter that I didn't know real estate. I knew how to recognize a problem and deal with it, head on. Afterward, things got quiet. The office buzzed with whispers. I could feel the eyes on me as I walked through the halls. Some of the employees avoided me, others gave me the same look. They didn't think I belonged, but I could see the shift. They were waiting for me to fail, but I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. One of the senior brokers, Alan, cornered me in the break room after a meeting. He was the type to wear a suit like it was part of his skin, his face always set in a hard, calculating expression. "You're going to have to play the game if you want to survive here," Alan said, his voice low but insistent. "It's not just about making decisions. It's about connections, understanding who you need to grease and when. You're not going to get anywhere just bulldozing your way through." I looked at him, trying to gauge whether he was offering advice or just trying to get under my skin. Either way, it pissed me off. I wasn't about to be some corporate puppet, catering to people who'd been in this game too long to care about anything but their own skin. "I've been playing a different game for years," I said, my voice sharp. "And it's worked out fine for me so far. I'm not interested in playing the same old power games." Alan shrugged, not bothered by my response. "Fine, but when it all falls apart, don't say I didn't warn you." I didn't bother answering him. He wasn't wrong, in a way. The real estate world was nothing like what I was used to. It was a web of egos, manipulation, and strategy. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that if I was going to make it here, I needed to find a balance. I didn't have to play by their rules, but I couldn't ignore the game entirely either. So I started using what I knew. I called brokers, studied the market, inspected properties. I spent long nights at the office, poring over reports, talking to anyone who could give me insight into what was happening on the ground. I wasn't making much progress yet, but at least I wasn't just sitting there pretending everything would fall into place. I was learning, even if it was painful. And it was painful. Every call, every meeting, every decision felt like I was pulling myself further into a world I wasn't sure I belonged in. The tension in the office grew thicker as the days passed. Some of the employees started to test me, questioning my decisions, testing my resolve. It wasn't easy to stand my ground, especially when I didn't always know if I was making the right call. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to back down. The more I settled in, the more I understood what needed to be done. I had to be tough. Not just tough enough to make the hard decisions, but tough enough to weather the storm. And if that meant playing the game in a way I didn't like, so be it. I could feel it inside me, the same grit I'd honed in the firehouse. It wasn't about knowing everything from the start. It was about keeping my head above water long enough to figure it out, and I would figure it out. No matter how many times they tested me, no matter how much they doubted me, I was here to stay. I didn't expect to see Lucas so soon after the last time we crossed paths, but when I walked into the office that morning, there he was, standing in front of my desk like a storm waiting to happen. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrow, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ellie," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "we need to talk." I didn't flinch. "About what?" His lips twisted into a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The decision you made on the Emerson property," he said, pacing around the room, his hands shoved in his pockets. "You just sold it off without even bothering to ask anyone. Do you have any idea how reckless that was?" I stayed seated, looking up at him. "It was the right decision," I replied, my tone steady. "The property wasn't performing. It was dragging down the portfolio, and I'm not going to sit around and let it bankrupt us." His eyes flashed with anger. "You don't get it, do you? It's not just about numbers, Ellie. It's about strategy, relationships, timing. You don't know the first thing about how these deals work. You've just been swinging a hammer your whole life, and now you think you can play in the big leagues? His words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because part of me still feared he was right. I'd never been part of this world, not really. But I wasn't going to let him see it. I wasn't going to let him take control again. Not after everything I'd already fought for. I don't need you to tell me how to run this company, I said, standing up and meeting his gaze. The estate's mine. It's my decision. If you don't like it, then maybe you should just go. He scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe I'd actually said that. You know, you really think this is about you, don't you? This isn't personal, Ellie. It's business. You're in over your head, and you're going to destroy everything Dad worked for. I'm trying to help you. I don't need your help, I shot back. I'm not stepping aside, Lucas. Not this time. He let out a bitter laugh, the kind that cut deeper than any insult. You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? You think just because Dad left you the company, you've suddenly become this big shot. But you're still the same little girl playing pretend. You're out of your league. I felt a surge of anger, but I controlled it, letting the words roll off me. He wanted to break me, to make me question myself. But this time, it wasn't working. I'd spent too long in his shadow, waiting for his approval, and I wasn't doing that anymore. Maybe you're right, I said, my voice steady. Maybe I'm out of my league, but I'm not walking away. I'm not giving up. I'm not a little girl anymore, Lucas. I didn't back down. Not this time. I stood my ground, watching his face twist with frustration. He took a deep breath, and for a moment I thought he might actually calm down. But then the anger came back. You're not fit to lead this company, he spat. You're weak, Ellie. You've always been weak. Just admit it. Let me take over, and I'll make sure you don't have to deal with any of this. You can retire. You can go back to your little firehouse where you belong. The words stung more than I wanted to admit, but they didn't break me. They didn't make me falter. I'd spent too long fighting for things that weren't mine, fighting for his approval, fighting to prove I wasn't a failure, but I wasn't fighting that battle anymore. I'm not retiring, I said, my voice quieter now, but every bit as firm. I'm not giving up, Lucas, and I'm not walking away. There was silence between us for a moment, the kind of silence that feels like the calm before a storm. I knew what he was thinking. He wanted to break me, make me quit, make me realize I couldn't do this. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Lucas stared at me, his eyes burning with resentment. He was angry, and I could see that all the old jealousy was still there, bubbling under the surface. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand that I was standing in the place he thought was his. He turned and walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. You'll regret this, he said, voice tight with fury. You'll regret not listening to me. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. He was gone before I could say anything else. I looked over at Rose, who had been sitting silently at the table the whole time, her face unreadable. She hadn't said a word, hadn't lifted a finger to stop the argument. It was like she didn't care, or maybe she just didn't believe in me enough to intervene. I felt a pang of disappointment, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't doing this for her. I wasn't doing it for Lucas. I was doing it for me. After the confrontation, I stepped outside for a moment, the cool air hitting my skin like a slap. I needed to clear my head. The weight of running this business, of living up to a legacy that had never been mine, still felt heavy. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden I wasn't sure I could carry. It felt like something I could own. I looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath. This was it. I had no idea what the next steps were, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to take them. I knew things couldn't stay the way they were. The company was bleeding money, and I couldn't just sit around and let it happen. So I started making moves. Tough ones. The first was selling off the underperforming properties. I'd gone through the entire portfolio, line by line, and found the ones that were draining the company's resources. Some of them were in bad locations, others were just poorly managed, and there was no reason to keep them hanging around, losing value. It was risky, but the only way to recover was to cut the fat and reinvest. I had a few heated discussions with the board. Some of them were skeptical, but I was firm. We can't afford to keep these properties. They're a liability, not an asset, I told them. We sell, reinvest, and focus on what's bringing in returns. This is how we move forward. It wasn't easy to convince them, but they came around. Slowly, the company started to turn a corner. We got a few high-profile clients, people who were actually interested in the properties that had potential. I had brokers out inspecting sites, renegotiating contracts, pushing new developments. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were hiccups along the way, and I spent more time on the phone with investors than I ever thought I would. But little by little, the company started picking up steam. The staff noticed. The tension I'd felt at the beginning, the cold shoulders, the side glances, began to fade. They started to see that I wasn't just here to fill a seat. I was in this for the long haul. People started showing up to meetings on time, offering ideas, taking initiative. The shift was subtle at first, but it was there, and as much as I hated to admit it, I was beginning to gain some respect. Even the board started to warm up. They'd been waiting for me to slip, but I hadn't. In fact, I'd done the opposite. I was making moves, staying ahead of problems, and proving that I could handle the weight of the company's future. The shift in attitude was palpable. They were starting to trust me. Of course, Lucas wasn't having it. He tried to undermine me at every turn, always hovering in the background, throwing in his 2 cents about how I was playing fast and loose with company assets. Every time I made a move, he was there, questioning my decisions, telling anyone who would listen that I didn't have the experience to run the business. But the more he did that, the more it backfired. He didn't get it. He was still stuck in his old ways. He thought he could bulldoze his way back in, but I wasn't having it. One afternoon, as I walked through the office, I overheard one of the senior brokers talking to a colleague. "She's not just making moves for the sake of it," he said, his voice low. "She's got a plan. She knows what she's doing." I could feel a small, victorious smile tug at my lips. There it was, the shift I'd been waiting for. People were starting to trust me, starting to believe I had what it took. Even Alan, the senior broker who'd warned me about playing the game, was starting to come around. He'd been keeping a close eye on me, but now he was offering advice on certain deals, helping me negotiate better terms with potential clients. He was still cautious, but I could tell he was impressed. And then there was Sophie. She'd been with the company longer than I had, a quieter presence who didn't make waves but always got things done. One day she stopped me in the hallway, her face unusually serious. "Ellie," she said, her voice steady, "I just wanted to say, I've been watching what you've been doing. I didn't think you could pull it off, but you're turning this place around." I hadn't expected that. Sophie had always been someone who kept to herself, but there was something in her eyes. Respect. It meant more than she probably realized. "Thanks," I said, feeling a bit of the weight lift off my shoulders. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "No, it's more than that. You're leading now. You've got people following you. We're all starting to trust you, and that's not something I thought I'd see." Her words stuck with me. People were starting to follow me, not because I was Lucas or because of the title I held, but because of the work I was putting in. Because I wasn't waiting for approval. I was showing them I could do it. It wasn't a perfect transformation. The challenges didn't stop, but each day the company felt more like mine, more like something I could shape and control. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally building a team that was willing to fight alongside me instead of against me. As I sat in my office late one night, reviewing the latest financials and making notes on the new contracts, I realized something. I'd come a long way from the person who was afraid to take the first step. I wasn't just managing this company, I was leading it. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. It had been building for weeks. The tension, the whispers, the way Lucas would show up at the office like a storm cloud on the horizon. But this time, he came directly to my office, his eyes sharp with purpose. I could feel it before he even opened his mouth. This wasn't going to be another round of insults. He had a plan, and he thought I was the one who was going to bite. "Ellie," he started, the smile he tried to force barely covering the edge of frustration in his voice. "I think it's time we have a conversation about the future of this company." I didn't sit back. I stayed at my desk, my eyes on him, arms crossed. "What do you mean, the future? This is the future, Lucas. I'm running it now." He shook his head like I just wasn't getting it. "No, that's not what I mean. What I'm suggesting is that we work together, as partners. We both know the company would benefit from my experience, and frankly, you could use the support. You've been making progress, but you're still not ready to take the reins completely." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean you want me to be a figurehead while you call the shots behind the scenes?" Lucas's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. "Number, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm offering you a partnership. We'd split the leadership responsibilities. You'd still have a voice, but we'd be working together. It's the best of both worlds." I leaned forward, steadying my gaze on him. "I'm not interested in splitting anything with you. You've made it clear time and time again that you don't respect me or my ability to lead. This offer, it's not about working together. It's about you trying to take control again." He didn't flinch. He was trying to hide it, but I could see the frustration building in him. Ellie, you can't seriously think you're doing this on your own. It's not about respect. It's about what's best for the business. You don't have the experience to make the right calls. You don't understand the game. You need me. I wasn't buying it anymore. No, Lucas, what I need is for you to finally accept that this is my company. I'm not playing your game. I'm not going to be the little sister who stands by while you pull the strings. This is mine, and I'm already more than capable of running it. His face hardened, but I could see something flicker behind his eyes, a flash of something like desperation. He wasn't used to hearing no. You're making a huge mistake, Ellie, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. You think you can do this without me? Fine. But don't come crawling to me when it all falls apart. I stood up, the tension in my chest rising, but I wasn't going to let it show. I'm not crawling anywhere. And I'm not going to let you undermine everything I've worked for just because you can't accept that you're no longer in charge. The silence between us was thick. I could feel the weight of his anger, but I wasn't backing down. He wanted me to second guess myself, to doubt my abilities. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into that office months ago, unsure of what I was doing. I've put in the work, Lucas. I've earned this, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. You may think I don't belong here, but this is my place now, and I'm not giving it up. Not for you, not for anyone. His face twisted with a mix of anger and disbelief, but he didn't say another word. He just turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stayed standing there for a moment, the silence settling in around me. For the first time, it wasn't a weight. It felt freeing. Lucas was gone, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't under his shadow anymore. The world that had always felt like his, the business, the family legacy, the expectations, was mine now. I wasn't the little sister waiting for approval. I was the one making decisions, the one in control. It was a strange mix of liberation and exhaustion. The reality of it all, of running this company, of constantly having to prove myself, was still heavy, but I could feel something shifting inside me. This was my fight, my responsibility, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I sat back down at my desk, the weight of the moment still settling in my chest, but I didn't feel overwhelmed anymore. I felt determined. This was mine. And I wasn't giving it up. The annual company meeting was here, and for the first time, it felt like I had something to stand on. The room was filled with the board, employees, and a few of our key clients. The air buzzed with anticipation, but it wasn't the kind of energy I'd seen in past meetings. This time, it wasn't about Lucas's charm or my father's legacy. It was about what I'd built. I stood at the front, the familiar weight of the room's eyes on me, but I didn't shy away from it this time. I'd been in rooms like this before, but I'd never felt like I belonged. Now, it felt like I'd earned my place. Good afternoon, everyone, I began, my voice steady, no hint of hesitation. It's been a year since I took on the leadership of West Enterprises, and I know it hasn't been an easy journey. But we're here today because of the work all of you have put in, our shared commitment to turning this company around. And I'm proud to say we've done just that. I paused, letting the room settle into the quiet. I could feel the shift. The staff, the board, they were listening. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the disappointment. I was their leader. We've made tough decisions, cut out the dead weight, and reinvested where it matters. We've secured new clients, turned around underperforming properties, and created a strategy that sets us up for success in the years ahead. But none of that happens without each of you pulling together and stepping up. The room was silent, and I could see the shift in their faces. The skepticism, the doubt that had once lingered, was gone. People were starting to believe in me, and not because I was their boss, but because I'd earned their trust. We've got some new initiatives in the works, new projects that will reshape our company's future. But it won't stop here. We'll keep pushing. We'll keep growing. Because this company is more than a business. It's a legacy, one we're going to build together. There was a beat of silence before the first few claps started, hesitant at first, then growing. The applause spread through the room, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I belonged here. After the speech, I stood by the podium, watching the reactions. I'd come so far from the unsure woman I'd once been, the one who hid behind Lucas's shadow, the one who couldn't even imagine herself in this position. Now I was the one giving the speech, the one everyone was looking to for guidance. I'd spent so many years feeling like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't a part of the family, like I was just playing a role I wasn't meant for. From the firehouse to this boardroom, I'd always felt like I was chasing something. But standing there, looking at the people who had stood by me, it hit me. This wasn't about filling anyone's shoes. It was about finding my own place. My father's legacy had been a weight, one I wasn't sure I could carry at first. But it wasn't just his anymore, it was mine. I had taken his empire and made it my own. I had earned my place in this world, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Lucas, take that away from me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I needed anyone's approval. Not from my father, not from Lucas. I was enough, just as I was. And this was only the beginning.